Matt Alt here with a big question for you. Is Japan the best country in the world? It's such a silly question, but an American magazine actually set out to answer it recently. Just last week, in fact. US News and World Report released its rankings of the best countries in the world. Number one came in at Switzerland, of all places. No offense to the Swiss, a great country with great chocolate and banking and neutrality, but I don't really think of it as a cultural influencer as such. Number two, Japan. Japan came in at number two, behind Switzerland, but it did beat America at number three, and Canada and Australia at number 4 and 5, respectively. There's probably something to comment on in the fact that 3 out of the top 5 are English-speaking nations, and this is published by an English-speaking magazine, but let's just put that aside for now. Now, best, what is best, right? I mean, what's the best food? What's the best car? What's the best anime? Well, actually, that one has an answer. It's Macross the movie from 1984. Everybody knows that. But seriously, best is such an amorphous concept. How do you decide it? In this particular index, the US News and World Report's index, they used a mixture of economic indicators like unemployment and like GNP, GDP, crime rates and things like that, and surveys of people all over the world who they sent this list of questions to, asking them to rank how they saw different countries ranking on it, which basically means this is a popularity contest. It's not something objective. It's not something rooted in hard data, or it's only partially rooted in hard data. Still, it's a kind of interesting thing. Japan is number 2, kind of has a ring to it, and actually it kind of fits. When you think about it, Japan was number 1, or pretty close to it, way back in the 1980s. That's when it was at its peak economically, it was at its peak for exports, and it was a time when everybody in the West thought that the future would soon be made in Japan, as you can see in all sorts of movies. That geisha at the beginning of Blade Runner, which is a very Tokyo-seeming kind of place, even though it's Los Angeles in the far-flung year of 2019. Or all of those Japan-bashing movies like Rising Sun, with Sean Connery speaking Japanese. I'm the Shampai, you're the Kohai. I actually like that. I really like that part of the movie anyway. Or like Gung Ho, remember this? It's like a movie where a Japanese auto plant comes to America and throws a small town into chaos. You saw this sort of thing everywhere. Japan was very strong back then, but it wasn't really loved. It didn't become loved until its economic bubble burst in 1990, and it kind of fell out of the headlines altogether. Back when I was a kid, you'd see like angry headlines about Japan nonstop. People really upset about trade deficits, or Americans losing their jobs, or entire industries disappearing because of these Japanese invaders coming and taking over. But you don't really see that anymore, because after the economic bubble burst, Japan stopped being this kind of financial tyrannosaurus and instead became an exporter of fantasies. Fantasies that basically everybody from Gen X through Gen Z grew up on, and they changed the way that we looked at Japan. So it's a really interesting conundrum that as Japan's economic star declined, its cultural one came up. But it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because Japan isn't in the headlines for anything negative, so you only think about it in terms that are positive, etc., etc. All of these controversial issues, and I bet you can't name what Japan's stance as a country is on them. This is kind of by design. Japanese leaders try to stay out of the spotlight. They're not really leading globally anymore, and they were even as recently as the 1990s, like for instance the Kyoto Protocol to limit greenhouse gases. That was signed here in Japan, and Japan was at that point a leader in global climate change efforts. Not so much anymore. And because of this, however, because Japan isn't really taking the lead on anything politically, there's nothing to push back against. There's nothing to get angry about. This is why you don't see people protesting Pokemon or Gundam models. It's because they don't represent anything negative. They only represent positive things. So the bottom line here is that Japan is number 2, which does have kind of a ring to it, actually kind of works, and it's kind of true. Japan isn't number one in a lot of ways. It kind of is a quieter, sort of more laid-back presence on the global stage. It's only really known for its fantasies, for its games, its cartoons, its comic books, its cleaning magic. Something to think about when you look at these lists of who's best and who's not. And that's it for this time. I'll be checking in again real soon with another video. And if you like this, please hit subscribe. Catch you next time.